You and Shadima Threadcraft co-authored an essay in the book on King and gender. And to put it bluntly, he had, especially I think earlier in his career, some pretty retrograde views. Tell me a little
Yes.
bit about what King believed.
What we try to draw out is that there's some key tensions in how King thinks about gender. It's not a topic that's received a lot of attention, and we were able to uncover some interesting archival materials. His old advice column in Ebony magazine.
That was
Um,
remarkable.
yeah, it's amazing reading if you ever get the chance. It's people writing in like 1950s Ebony to ask King for advice about all sorts of things like my husband's cheating on me and he drinks too much and what do I do? Um, but you actually learn a lot about how he thinks about the family from those and then some of his sermons. And um, what we found is that King kind of, one way you could think about it is that King is sort of working at cross purposes. So on the one hand, he's got these defenses of nonviolent direct action, civil disobedience as having a magnificent universal quality, right? That it's more inclusive than forms of violent rebellion. He's extremely critical of W.E.B. Du Bois's idea of the talented tenth, right? These ideas of politics not being able to include a wide range of people. That they should be the province of experts or those who have the capacities for violent action. Um, he also endorses things like basic minimum income as being constitutive of our dignity and respecting a wide range of our capacities, not just those that are going to receive compensation as wage labor. But on the other hand, he's got these really retrograde views about sex and gender. So often the Southern Christian Leadership Conference meetings, are organized in such a way that women basically aren't allowed to speak or introduce um, new items on the agenda. When they are organizing major events, women often are not invited to speak. Um, when he writes about what the family is supposed to be, or he writes that basically the family's got to be organized so that everyone takes joy in each other's pursuits and flourishing, but that all of that needs to be tethered to recognition of the nature of man and woman, and then this sort of classic, um, you know, old school complementarity, patriarchal gender norms, right? So man is active and he needs to be outside of the home, and he's always got to measure himself against the achievements of other men. While women, even if they have these interests outside of the home, they really achieve their most most fundamental flourishing in the space of the home and raising a family. Um, and so a lot of the advice he gives to people, and a lot of the ways he thinks about these things all come back to his sense of the appropriate place of women and men and his notion of the family. And so one of the things that Shatima Threadcraft and I try to do is show, not only just critique those things, which is pretty easy to critique, but also show how the other elements of his thought, this investment in the universal quality of political action, nonviolent direct action, his investment in basic minimum income, his deep attunement to the ways in which welfare bureaucracies and bureaucracies more generally can become humiliating, and the need for pretty active citizen engagement, to constantly contest relations of power and housing and bureaucracy, how all of those things can be really robust elements of a left feminist vision, but how in order to get there, you'd have to jettison and uproot, King's, ontology of gender and his norms about the family. And
You have
at
to
that point,
read King against King is the way you put it.
exactly. And at that point, that's not King's thought. So like King himself is a sexist, but are there resources that can be reconstructed, and you have something in the spirit of King? It's not his thought. He is a sexist.
One thing that I took from that essay was that he was at his most feminist, even if accidentally, when he was most focused on economic justice.
I think that's right. I think he's also got some interesting moves as a critique of Black power masculinity. I think so much of what the Black Power movement is up to uh, revolves around the rhetorical deployment of certain kinds of performances of masculinity. And to the extent that King manages to deflate those things, I think that's really useful as well. But certainly, I think the biggest resources for feminist reconstruction are in this realm of political economy.
On the Black Power debate question, you pull a really powerful quote from King. One of the greatest paradoxes of the Black Power movement is that it talks unceasingly about not imitating the values of white society, but in advocating violence, it is imitating the worst, the most brutal, and the most uncivilized value of American life.
I think what he's getting at there, and he draws this out in lots of subtle ways. Just that if there's going to be a revolution in values, you can't just it can't just be performed at the level of rhetoric, right? So that one of his critiques of the Black Power movement is that, for all of this rhetoric about, creating a new Black society or refounding the world upon, the different sort of ontological character of Blackness, which is also, quite mythic, but people believe, that really we need to have a kind of incisive attunement toward what practices have created the world that we live in. And one of the things he's really, I think this is also a quite feminist moment in King, is that he's quite critical of a stance of hypermasculinity, which he often calls a kind of frontier mentality or cowboy mentality, that he sees as endemic in American political culture. So that, we often treat it as reflexive that we should respond to insult with violence or violence with more violence. And not only is that corrosive in protest politics, but it's corrosive at the level of geopolitics and gets us embroiled in wars like Vietnam, which have such severe consequences for, democracy, for human flourishing, for global justice, that, you really want to jettison the kind of pernicious cultural norms that lead you to think things like that are rational, when they're quite obviously not, given all the other things you're ostensibly committed to.